Hey there, this is your drowsy historian. Tonight, you find yourself aboard one of Magellan's ships, adrift on the vast ocean, embarking on a voyage around the world. The salty air, the creaking timbers, and the seemingly endless horizon stretch out before you as far as the eye can see. You're not a captain, nor an officer, but rather a common sailor, simply moving with the unhurried rhythm of life at sea. Before we begin, I have a small request. Please let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. If you'd prefer these stories without any interruptions, you can join my Patreon. The link is in the description. And for the ultimate immersive experience, I suggest using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed for wearing even while you sleep. I've included a link to my favorite pair, along with other sleep aids, in the description below. Now lie back, relax, and let's begin. You stand on the docks of Seville, where the ropes groan and the gulls cry. Everything seems to move in slow motion, a kind of weary respiration shared between the men, the wood, and the water. The morning air carries a faint taste of salt and oranges, a sweetness already tainted by the scent of tar. Around you, sailors shuffle in silence, their boots pressing old stains into the wooden planks, a map of every journey that started here and never came back. The ships await, their hulls wide and weathered, painted with promises that no one entirely believes. You gaze at them as if they were slumbering beasts tethered to the pier, dreaming of the open sea. Each one bears a name meant to evoke the divine. Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, Santiago. Yet, they all seem more human than holy, wrapped in rope and decay, exhaling the faint musk of mildew and ambition. Deep within their holds, casks roll, nails creak, and a hammer rings out in a slow, methodical beat, the very pulse of departure. You don't quite remember choosing this life. Not clearly, anyway. Only that someone spoke of glory, and you believed them because it was easier than refusing. You recall the smell of parchment, the scratch of a quill, and a voice reading something official. Something about pay and rations and the glory of Spain. You remember nodding in agreement. You remember the sound of your own name being recorded, the way it echoed faintly in the small room. After that, everything began to drift gently, inevitably, toward the water. The harbor is awake now, though no one truly looks alive. Men carry barrels across narrow planks, bending beneath the weight, their eyes unfocused. A clerk in a faded coat counts them aloud, his numbers carried away on the breeze. No one pays attention. Counting has become a ritual, something done to remind everyone that order still exists. Behind him, crates are opened and shut again. Biscuits, salted meat, vinegar, dried beans, small tokens of civilization destined to spoil in the humidity of another ocean. You walk among them, a shadow in motion, following orders that have already lost their meaning. The morning sun glides along the water, reflecting off the wet ropes, blinding and soft. You squint against it and feel for a moment the faint pull of something larger. Not excitement exactly, but a kind of surrender. It's easier to drift with the current than to fight against it. A boy nearby hums under his breath as he stacks wooden bowls. The tune is without melody, repeating itself until it becomes part of the air itself. Somewhere beyond the docks, church bells ring, slow and indifferent. They could be marking the hour, or blessing the voyage, or simply reminding the city that time continues to pass. You realize it doesn't matter which. Someone calls your name, not loudly, and you turn to find a man handing you a folded piece of paper. It lists the ship's provisions, quantities, numbers, weights, all written in an elegant hand that has never touched salt water. You sign the bottom without reading it, your fingers leaving a smudge. The ink shines briefly, then dulls. You hand it back, and he moves on to the next name. A wind picks up, lifting the edges of the tarps, stirring the smells of the river. Muddy, cold, and full of secrets. You breathe it in slowly, letting it settle somewhere deep in your chest. This is the scent of beginnings, though it feels nothing like hope. The men talk of distant islands and gold, of deeds that will make them legends. You hear the words, but not the faith. The world they imagine feels flat, like a map spread across a table. Edges neat, oceans blue and harmless. The real one waits beyond the mouth of the Guadalquivir, vast and heavy, unmarked. You pause by a crate stamped with the royal emblem. Its lid is nailed shut, but you can guess what's inside. Weapons polished for ceremonies that will never happen, flags that will fade before they're raised, symbols that mean everything to those who stay behind and almost nothing to those who leave. You brush your hand across the wood. It's warm from the sun, rough with splinters. You think of the journey ahead and realize there is no shape to a right there, you sleepy-eyed history buff. Tonight, you find yourself aboard one of Magellan's vessels, adrift on the seemingly endless ocean, embarking on a global circumnavigation where the salty air, the groan of timber, and the ever-present horizon are all that meet the eye. You're not a captain, nor even an officer, just a regular sailor, moving to the languid beat of life at sea. Before we get underway, would you do me a small kindness? Tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. If you'd prefer to listen to these tales without interruptions, you can always join the Patreon. The link's down in the description. And for the ultimate, truly immersive experience, think about popping in a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfy, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while you slumber. I've included a link to my favorite pair, along with other helpful sleep aids, in the description below. Now, settle back, get comfy, and let's set sail. You're standing on the Seville docks, where the ropes protest and the gulls keen, and everything seems to exist in slow motion, a kind of weary respiration shared between man, wood, and water. The morning air carries a faint tang of salt and oranges, a sweetness already tainted by the pungent aroma of tar. Around you, sailors shuffle in a hushed silence, their boots imprinting old stains into the dock planks, a silent map of every voyage that began here and never saw its return. The ships lie in wait, their hulls broad and patient, adorned with promises that no one fully trusts. You regard them as you might slumbering beasts, tethered to the pier, dreaming of the fathomless depths. Each bears a name intended to sound divine: Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, Santiago, yet they all seem more earthly than holy, swathed in rope and decay, exhaling a subtle musk of mildew and ambition. Somewhere deep within their holds, casks roll, nails protest, and a hammer rings out in a slow, deliberate rhythm, the very heartbeat of departure. You don't quite recall choosing this life. Not distinctly, anyway. Only that someone spoke of glory, and you believed them, for it was easier than declining. You recall the scent of parchment, the scratch of a quill, and a voice reciting something official, something regarding pay and rations, and the glory of Spain. You remember nodding along. You remember the sound of your own name being entered into the record, the way it echoed faintly in the small, stuffy room. After that, everything began to move slowly, inevitably, towards the water. The harbor is now awake, though no one truly appears alive. Men lug barrels across narrow planks, stooped beneath their weight, their eyes unfocused. A clerk, in a faded coat, counts them aloud, his numbers drifting away on the breeze, unheeded. The counting has become a ritual, something performed to reassure everyone that order still prevails. Behind him, crates are opened and then shut once more. Biscuits, salted meat, vinegar, dried beans, small tokens of civilization destined to spoil in the humid embrace of another ocean. You walk amongst them, a shadow in motion, following orders that have already lost their meaning. The morning sun slides across the water, reflecting off the wet ropes, blinding and yet soft. You squint against it and feel, for a fleeting moment, the faint pull of something larger. Not excitement, precisely, but more of a surrender. It's easier to drift with the current than to fight against it. A boy nearby hums under his breath as he stacks wooden bowls. The tune is without melody, repeating itself until it simply becomes part of the air. Somewhere beyond the docks, church bells chime, slow and indifferent. They could be marking the hour, or blessing the voyage, or simply reminding the city that time still marches on. You realize it doesn't matter which. Someone calls your name, not loudly, and you turn to see a man handing you a folded piece of paper. It details the ship's provisions, quantities, numbers, weights, all written in an elegant script that has never known salt water. You sign the bottom without reading it, your fingers leaving a smudge upon the page. The ink shines briefly, then dulls. You hand it back, and he moves on to the next name. A wind picks up, lifting the edges of the tarpaulins, stirring up the scent of the river, muddy, cold, and laden with secrets. You inhale deeply, allowing it to settle somewhere deep within your chest. This is the scent of beginnings, though it bears no resemblance to hope. The men speak of distant islands and gold, of feats that will turn them into legends. You hear the words, but not the conviction. The world they imagine feels flat, like a map spread out across a table, edges neatly defined, oceans blue and harmless. The real one awaits beyond the mouth of the Guadalquivir, vast and heavy, uncharted. You pause by a crate stamped with the royal emblem. Its lid is nailed shut, but you can guess what lies within. A weapons polished for ceremonies that will never take place, flags that will fade before they're ever raised, symbols that mean everything to those who stay behind and almost nothing to those who depart. You brush your hand across the wood. It's warm from the sun, rough with splinters. You contemplate the journey ahead and realize it has no discernible shape, only distance. A gull lands on the railing near you, its eyes pale and vacant. It pecks at something unseen, then takes flight again, its wings slicing through the air. You watch it disappear into the glare. You wonder how far it will go before turning back. Most creatures, you think, instinctively know when to turn around. The quartermaster's voice drifts through the din, calm, measured, never raised. He's been saying the same things for weeks: where to stow the barrels, how to coil the ropes, when to rest, when to work. You can tell he no longer hears his own words. He speaks because silence would give way to doubt, and that's a luxury this voyage cannot afford. The hours stretch thin. Shadows shorten, then lengthen once again. By midday, the harbor reeks of sweat and oil, of bread left too long baking in the sun. You drink water from a tin cup, though it tastes faintly of iron. Someone nearby laughs, a small, weary sound. You don't know the joke, but you let it linger, soft as a breeze. In this place, even laughter feels rehearsed. Beyond the warehouses, the city continues on narrow streets, tiled roofs, the hum of daily life, untouched by this departure. You think of the people there, sitting in taverns, speaking of explorers as though they were already figures of myth. You wonder if they ever imagine the noise, the smell, the sheer tedium that fills the spaces between moments of discovery. Probably not. Stories are always cleaner than the truth. You look again at the ship. Men climb the rigging like slow-moving insects, adjusting the sails that will soon carry you away. The canvas breathes in the wind, a vast, white lung. Somewhere beneath all the activity, the wood sighs. It sounds almost human. You imagine the ship remembering every voyage it has undertaken, every name carved into its very bones. Soon, it will remember yours too. A priest appears near the pier, robe fluttering, face flushed from the heat. He blesses the fleet in a language that sounds like distant thunder. Holy water falls in brief, glittering arcs. The droplets strike the deck, vanish, and leave nothing behind. The men cross themselves out of habit, out of fear, out of superstition. You mimic them without thinking. The gesture feels less like faith and more like acknowledgement, a quiet agreement with uncertainty. The tide shifts. The ropes tighten against their posts, creaking softly. A sailor near you mutters that it will be soon. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the next dawn. You nod. No one seems to know the exact hour of departure, but it hardly matters. The leaving has already begun. It started the moment you sign the paper, maybe even earlier. Every action since has merely been confirmation. As evening settles across the harbor, the colors change. Gold becomes gray. Blue turns to slate. The noise fades until only the faint slap of water remains. Lanterns are lit along the pier, their reflections trembling like memories that can't stay still. The air cools, and with it comes a silence so profound it almost hums. You find a place to sit, a coil of rope near the edge. The wood beneath you is damp. You watch the ripples gather around the posts and break softly against the hulls. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings again. You count the echoes until they fade. You think about how many nights will sound like this, the slow, measured breathing of the sea, the rhythm of men pretending they understand it. A breeze brushes your face, carrying the faint scent of citrus from the city. For a moment, you think of home, the narrow room, the window that overlooks a courtyard, the sound of someone sweeping at dawn. The memory feels small, almost ornamental, like something you once possessed but forgot the purpose of. You try to hold on to it, but the wind takes it back. Somewhere down the dock, a man hums again, the same wordless tune as before. It rises and falls with the water. You close your eyes and let it carry you. The harbor sways gently beneath you, and the world seems to tilt just enough to make you drowsy. You don't dream yet, but you feel close. The ships rest, awaiting morning. Their masts lean towards the stars like weary prayers. You imagine the ocean beyond them, endless, patient, indifferent, and realize it has already begun to pull you in. You breathe slow and even, and listen to the sound of ropes shifting in the dark. You don't think about tomorrow. You think only of the quiet harbor and how it holds its breath before the first step into forever. The morning finds you below deck, where the air no longer belongs to the world outside. It hangs in layers, stale, sour, and alive with the scent of old wood and damp rope. Lantern light spills across the beams, revealing a narrow space crowded with barrels, each one sweating quietly in the humidity. You move through them as though walking inside the lungs of the ship, careful not to disturb the rhythm of its breath. Your hands touch the sides of the casks as you pass. Salted pork, vinegar, dried beans, water, oil, each marked, sealed, and recorded. The wood is rough and cold, slick where the brine has leaked through. The ink on the markings has begun to blur, letters fading before they've even set sail. You stop at one and trace a finger along the word cairn. The salt has leached the color from the wood, leaving it pale and ghostly. Everything here, you think, is already in the process of becoming a memory. A man with a ledger calls out numbers. His voice sounds muffled, as if trapped inside the pages. You answer without thinking, your own voice thin against the echoing hull. The exchange repeats itself, mechanical, predictable, a ritual meant to impose order on a world that no longer obeys it. The act of counting becomes a kind of prayer, each entry another way of saying, "We are still here. We still exist. We still believe in the arithmetic of survival." The smell grows heavier as the lanterns burn low. Somewhere, water drips, patient and indifferent. It might be condensation, or a leak, or just the ship settling into its own weight. You stop to listen, counting the rhythm. It falls with the precision of a clock, though there are no clocks here, only time, shapeless and moist, collecting in corners. You lift the lid to inspect the contents of a barrel. Inside, rows of biscuits, hard as stone, stamped with the royal seal. You knock one against the edge. It sounds like bone. A fly circles lazily above it before vanishing into the shadows. You close the lid and press the seal tight again. The air tastes of mildew and iron. Voices rise from above deck. Orders, movement, the scrape of crates being dragged across planks. The ship is filling itself, swallowing everything it will need to stay alive. Men pass by in single file, shoulders bent beneath sacks of flour. No one speaks to you, but they nod in rhythm, each face etched with the same dull understanding. Every pound loaded now will one day be lifted again, emptier, lighter, gone. You find yourself near the bow, where the floor slopes slightly. The lanterns sway. The shadows move with them, slow and deliberate, like something alive. You sit for a moment on a crate labeled Aceite d'Oliva. The oil inside sloshes quietly, thick and golden. Its sound reminds you of the river, that same soft persistence. You close your eyes and almost hear the harbor again, gulls, bells, the faint hum of the city. But when you open them, there's only the close dark, the smell of salt, the sound of another barrel being rolled into place. The quartermaster passes through, his steps steady, his coat brushed with sawdust. He checks the lists against the markings, his eyes scanning the numbers without expression. He pauses once, adjusts a figure, and moves on. His face is not cruel, only tired. You watch him disappear between the rows, swallowed by the monotony. A man like that, you think, could live forever, as long as there's something to count. A rat darts across the floor. Its fur shines briefly in the light before it slips into a crack near the waterline. You follow it with your eyes, but there's no sound after it goes. The ship has already accepted it. Some of the men call them bad omens. Others say they're companions, creatures that know how to survive what humans invent. You decide not to dwell on it. Someone opens the hatch above, and sunlight slices through the darkness, sharp and white. Dust rises in the beam like fine sand suspended in water. You breathe it in and feel it catch in your throat. The light transforms the space into something unreal, a cathedral of cargo and shadows. For a moment, it's beautiful in its emptiness. When the hatch closes, the air seems heavier, thicker, as though the world outside has withdrawn once more. You return to the ledger, reading names of goods that have lost their meaning. Rice, peas, cheese, almonds, gunpowder. You imagine them rotting one by one, turning soft, sour, unrecognizable. Yet here they are, written neatly, each with its number and measure, its promise of control. You hear a voice from behind, a low chuckle, not quite humor. A man sits against a stack of crates, sharpening a knife on a whetstone. The sound is rhythmic, almost soothing. He doesn't look up as he speaks. Funny thing, he says, we carry all this to keep us alive, and all it does is remind us how close we are to dying. You nod. It isn't a conversation. It's simply noise to fill the air. The knife keeps whispering against the stone. You keep writing. The ship creaks as though in agreement. Above, the bells ring faintly, the sound filtered through layers of wooden air. It feels distant, like a memory of church. You realize the day is moving on without you. The sun must have shifted, but here it makes no difference. Time behaves strangely below deck. It slows, thickens, forgets itself. You could stay for an hour or a lifetime and never know which. When you climb the ladder to the deck, the light hits you like a physical weight. The sky is too vast. You blink until the shapes return. The masts rising like bare trees, the men moving between them, the water beyond, flat and endless. The air here smells of wind and resin, cleaner, but no kinder. You stand for a moment, adjusting to the brightness, then turn towards the stores being hoisted aboard. Barrels swing in the air on thick ropes, groaning with their own mass. Men guide them, hands on the ropes, faces turned away from the sun. The motion is slow, careful, inevitable. A single misstep could crush a man, but no one seems afraid. There's a kind of resignation in their movements, the same acceptance you felt below deck, translated into muscle and rope. The sound of hammering rises again. Nails driven into place, lids sealed, boards secured. The rhythm is steady, almost musical. You think about how many times those same sounds have echoed in harbors just like this, for voyages that vanished into the mist. The thought doesn't frighten you. It only makes the moment feel longer. Clerk calls out another list. His voice merges with the hammering, the creak of pulleys, the murmur of the river. Everything becomes one long, unbroken note. You breathe it in and feel the ship's body growing around you, plank by plank, number by number. By dusk, the loading slows. The men rest against barrels, sweat drying in pale streaks on their skin. Someone passes around a jug of water. Another wipes the dust from his hands. You find yourself staring at the horizon, the same soft blur where sky and river meet. It hasn't changed since yesterday. It may never change again. The quartermaster's voice carries over the deck, reading the final tallies. His tone is flat, precise, almost tender. There's comfort in the completion of lists. The men nod as though absolved. Around you, ropes tighten, sails shift, and the ship exhales, a long, low sound that seems to emanate from its very bones. Night gathers slowly. Lanterns are lit again, their glow trembling against the dark. You lean against the rail and watch the reflection of the light on the water, gold trembling on black. Somewhere below, among the barrels and lists, everything you'll need for months lies waiting, silent and sealed. You think of it as a kind of promise, though it feels more like a sentence. The air cools, a breeze rises from the river, carrying the smell of wet rope and unburned oil. You close your eyes and listen to the creak of the ship, the faint clatter of chains, the water brushing against the hull. It sounds like breathing again, slow, steady, endless. You match your own breath to it until you can't tell which is which. The men begin to drift towards sleep, some curled in corners, others leaning against barrels they've lifted all day. Their murmurs fade one by one, leaving only the ship and the water. You stay where you are, hands resting on the rail, eyes half open. Somewhere in the dark, the quartermaster closes his book. The sound is final, like the turning of a key. You imagine the barrels below, the rows of supplies resting in their quiet order. Each one holds a measure of survival, a portion of time. Together, they weigh more than the ship itself. You think about how much longer the world will feel this heavy. How long before counting stops mattering? The wind shifts, and the ropes whisper against the mast. You breathe again, slow and even. The air tastes of salt and ink and something faintly metallic, the residue of what's coming. You don't move. The ship rocks gently beneath you, cradling the weight of provisions, the weight of men, the weight of every name written down to keep from being forgotten. And somewhere far beyond the edge of the harbor, the sea waits, vast, patient, and indifferent, as if it has already begun to measure you, too. The morning arrives without ceremony. The river lies still beneath a thin veil of fog, and the sound of bells reaches you before the light does, a slow toll, patient and distant, folding into the rhythm of the water against the hull. You rise because everyone else does. No one speaks. It feels less like waking and more like being summoned. The deck is slick with dew. The ropes glisten, coiled like sleeping serpents. Somewhere above, sails unfurl with a soft, deliberate sigh, filling with the first breath of wind. The sound is immense yet gentle, a single exhale stretched across the sky. You watch the canvas swell, white and endless, and feel the ship tremble, not from fear, but from remembering its purpose. The men move around you in quiet coordination. Boots thud against wet planks. Pulleys creak, and the low murmur of commands passes through the air like prayer. The harbor, once so loud, has grown hushed, as though the city itself is holding its breath. The only motion now is the slow shifting of the tide, urging the ship outward. You glance toward the shore. Seville is still there, pale rooftops stacked like old bones, the faint shape of a cathedral's tower piercing the mist. From here, it already looks like a memory. People line the docks, small and silent, their faces blurred by distance. Some wave, others simply watch. The gulls circle above them, their cries sharp and short-lived. A priest raises his hand in blessing, his voice lost in the wind. A thin trail of smoke drifts from a censer, curling upward, swallowed by the morning. You can't smell the incense from here, only the thicker scent of tar and wet rope, of the river stirred from its sleep. You imagine the holy words falling uselessly into the water, dissolving before they reach you. Orders are given. The mooring lines are loosened, thick ropes sliding across the pier with a low groan. One by one, they drop into the river, a heavy, final. The ship shifts its weight, an animal testing its limbs. You feel it beneath your feet, that subtle change in balance, the world tilting slightly towards motion. The current catches. The prow turns gently away from the dock, and the space between ship and land begins to widen. The men at the rail watch in silence as the distance grows, a few meters, then more. The city seems to recede rather than the ship moving forward. You realize that leaving is not movement but a ratio. The bells continue to ring, slower now, as though fading into themselves. The sails tighten. The wind gathers. You hear the captain's voice, steady, formal, stripped of emotion, calling to adjust the rigging. The words are simple, practiced, but they sound enormous in the stillness. They mark the beginning, though it feels nothing like one. The river widens as you drift downstream. The water glints like dull metal under the weak sun. Along the banks, warehouses give way to fields, then to empty stretches of earth, where the horizon becomes a smudge. You stand by the railing, watching as color drains from the world, the ochres of the city replaced by the gray-green monotony of open water. Someone near you hums, soft and tuneless, just enough to disturb the silence. The sound mixes with the creak of wood and the slap of water against the hull. It's a kind of music that doesn't ask to be heard. It simply exists like breathing. You find yourself matching your heartbeat to it, slow and even. The river air carries the scent of silt and decay, of vegetation half alive. It clings to your clothes, mixes with sweat, becomes part of you. You wipe your palms on your trousers, but the dampness never leaves. Every surface is moist. Rope, wood, skin, as though the ship has already begun to merge with the sea. A sailor passes you, carrying a coil of line across his shoulders. His face is blank, focused, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the rigging. He looks as though he's seen this moment before, in dreams or in repetition. You wonder how many times he's left and returned, or if he's ever returned at all. His footsteps fade, swallowed by the noise of the ship, settling into its rhythm. The day unfolds without hurry. The sun rises behind a curtain of haze, pale and indifferent. You eat from a wooden bowl, hard bread, The wooden bowl held a meager offering, a sliver of cheese, water with a faint, woody taste from the barrel. Each bite felt like a chore. The food clung stubbornly in your throat. Yet, you chewed until it was gone, driven by a silent understanding. Eating wasn't about nourishment. It was a pact, an agreement to simply keep going. The men around you spoke little. All that could be said had already been uttered, and any predictions felt hollow, untrustworthy. They moved with an eerie precision, each task performed as if guided by unseen strings. In their repetition, you found a strange comfort. The same gestures, the same sounds, endlessly replayed, order was the only tangible thing. By afternoon, the city had receded into nothingness, swallowed by the distance. Only the river remained, a constant companion winding endlessly towards an invisible horizon. The ship rocked gently, its movements unhurried and deliberate, creating a hypnotic rhythm. A long inhale, a long exhale. Leaning against the rail, you watched the ripples stretch out behind the ship, like threads unraveling into the distance. As the sun descended, the water grew darker, and shadows began to creep across the deck, thin and soft, blurring the sharp edges of everything. The crew fell into a quietude. Someone adjusted a rope, another coughed. Beyond that, only the broad, slow, endless sound of the river filled the air. You glanced back one last time. The land had become a mere smudge, an outline dissolving into the rising mist. The realization washed over you without drama. You were gone. Not tragically, not dramatically, simply gone. Like a footprint disappearing beneath the encroaching tide. The thought should have felt monumental, yet it felt small, almost bureaucratic. Like signing your name again on a document you'd already forgotten. The captain stood near the helm, his silhouette a rigid form against the dimming sky. His posture remained unchanged as the light faded, looking neither forward nor back, as if both directions were one and the same. The officers moved around him with the quiet confidence of men who knew the ritual, even if they no longer understood its meaning. The ceremony of command continued, even as belief dwindled to routine. The river narrowed once more before spilling into the vast expanse of the sea. You could feel the subtle deepening of the ship's motion, the way the water grew heavier beneath the hull. The sound, too, shifted deeper, slower, as if the world itself were taking a longer, more profound breath. The men glanced towards the horizon, though nothing awaited them there, only the widening gray of the sky. Evening arrived without fanfare, devoid of color. The sails turned darker against the sky, their edges glowing faintly in the last vestiges of light. The wind shifted, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of salt, a promise of endlessness that you tasted on your lips. The ship tilted slightly as it caught the open air, and the river's boundaries faded. The land retreated one final time, polite and indifferent. The men lit the lanterns along the deck, their glow wavering in the wind, reflected in the water as trembling circles. You watched the patterns form and fade, as if the ship were leaving tiny ghosts in its wake. The noise of the harbor had vanished, replaced by the low, steady murmuring of the sea, like thought itself slowing to sleep. A voice called from somewhere near the mast. A command, perhaps, or maybe a prayer. The words drifted upward, caught by the sails, and scattered into nothingness. Tilting your head back, you saw the first stars appearing, faint and hesitant. They seemed to move as the ship moved, as if following rather than guiding. You remained at the rail long after the others had gone below. A coldness began to seep into your hands, but you didn't stir. The sea glowed faintly beneath the moon, its surface smooth and unreadable. You couldn't discern where the water ended and where the night began. They shared the same texture, the same calm depth. Somewhere beneath that surface lay the world you had left behind, The docks, the ledges, the barrels stacked in orderly rows. The thought drifted through you like a slow current, too gentle to disturb the stillness. Everything felt suspended, caught between departure and arrival, between the place you were and the place you hadn't yet reached. Closing your eyes, you listened. The sea whispered against the hull, the sails murmured overhead, and the wood beneath your feet moved in a tired rhythm that seemed capable of continuing forever. You breathed with it, slow and quiet, until the line between you and the ship blurred and disappeared. When you opened your eyes again, the horizon was nothing but darkness. The city was gone. The river was gone. Only the steady pulse of water and wind remained, and the faint, persistent feeling that nothing had changed at all. Not even when the wind stings his skin or the deck lurches violently beneath him. It's as if his true anchor isn't the ship itself, but the very idea it represents, its unwavering purpose. He seems older than his years suggest, although perhaps that's merely a trick of the light. Out here, even the vibrancy of youth fades, succumbing to the same salt-gray exhaustion that permeates everything. He never raises his voice, never needs to. Orders flow from him quietly, channeled through subordinates, translated into action. Men move with a sense of inevitability, finding solace in motion over contemplation. There's a certain comfort in relinquishing doubt, in allowing direction to originate from an external source. Each command resonates with the weight of destiny, as unavoidable as gravity itself. When his voice reaches you, it carries an inexplicable weight, neither kind nor cruel, but utterly, undeniably certain, a certainty you've long ceased to expect from the world. He speaks as though he's already witnessed the world's end, as if the ocean itself has confided its deepest secrets, revealed its ultimate form to him. You find yourself almost believing him, because embracing such a belief is far easier than confronting the capriciousness of chance. They say his charts are kept under lock and key, inaccessible even to the ship's officers. He studies them in the dead of night, illuminated by the solitary glow of a lantern, its light seeping through the cabin window like a secret too profound to be spoken aloud. Pass by, and you'll hear nothing, no pen scratching, no footsteps, not even a breath, only the faint, ethereal crackle of the flame. You can't help but wonder if he ever sleeps. The men speak of him only in hushed whispers. Not quite gossip, more like the hushed tones of superstition. They claim he prays to a forgotten god, one who listens solely to the language of map. They say he carries a relic from the east, though no one has ever laid eyes on it. They say he has no fear of the world's edge because his mind has already journeyed there and back. You don't dare inquire if any of it is true. Belief has become the most valuable currency on this ship, and you spend it with utmost care. Sometimes, he walks the deck alone after nightfall. You hear the measured rhythm of his boots, slow and unhurried. Even the sea itself seems to quiet as he passes. The lantern casts his shadow across the weathered boards, elongated and fractured by the ship's relentless motion, stretching towards the bow, as if reaching out to touch the unknown that lies ahead. Gazing at that shadow, you realize you know it far better than the man's face. There's something almost mechanical in his movements, every gesture precise, every turn deliberate. It's the kind of rigid control that makes you uneasy, reminding you of things that possess the potential to break, yet never do. He never flinches when the wind suddenly shifts direction, never hesitates when men dare to question his decisions. He never raises his voice. He doesn't need to. Obedience has become a conditioned reflex, as automatic as breathing. The officers watch him intently. You can sense it, their loyalty laced with something colder, a subtle awareness that the ship's destiny rests in the hands of a man who believes the sea can be reasoned with. When he speaks of the voyage, his words take on the cadence of ritual. "We are instruments of discovery," he proclaims. "History yields to those who move first." The crew echoes his words softly, as if fearing they might shatter if spoken too loudly. You can't help but wonder what kind of mind it requires to gaze upon the vast ocean and perceive a path, to look at the horizon and deem it unfinished. There's courage in that, perhaps, or utter madness. Out here, the line between the two blurs into irrelevance. In those rare moments when he passes close by, you catch his scent. Parchment, salt, and a faint metallic tang, like ink left too long in the sun. His eyes are steady, almost unnervingly so, the kind that seem to look through you rather than at you. You nod when he speaks, though you can never quite recall his words afterward. They aren't intended for you, but for the air itself, for the sea, for whatever God lends an ear to men who insist on circling the earth. Once, a man is punished for disobedience. It happens with a quiet efficiency. The captain doesn't raise his hand, doesn't even appear angry. The order is given, the lashes are delivered, and the silence is maintained. You watch from a distance, the sound of the whip muffled by the wind. The man screams, a small, almost embarrassed sound, quickly swallowed by the sea's relentless rhythm. When it's over, the captain walks away as if the event were nothing more than a scheduled part of the day's routine. There's no hint of cruelty, only procedure. That's what frightens you most. Days pass, or what you believe to be days. He remains unchanged. The ship bends to his will, as if it recognizes something kindred in him, a stoicism that mirrors its own wooden soul. When the wind dies, he simply waits. When it returns, he listens to it as if he were a priest hearing confession. His calm becomes your refuge. You begin to trust it, even as you fear it. It's rumored that he keeps a small journal, its pages never seen by another's eyes. Yet, the mere rumor is enough to imbue it with a sacred quality. Some say he doesn't write words, but coordinates. Others that he records confessions, promises to the dead, or maps that shift with the tide. You imagine him there, hunched over his table, writing in a language no one else remembers, a man translating the will of the sea into something comprehensible to humans. The voyage is changing him, though it's hard to pinpoint exactly how. His beard grows thicker, his face leaner, his eyes burn brighter in the dim light. He speaks less and less, and yet when he does, men listen with heightened attention. The silence that follows his words always feels deliberate, as if meaning lingers there, waiting for those who can endure its weight. At times, you wonder what drives him. Not gold, certainly not fame. Those are the concerns of kings and merchants. His hunger runs deeper, older. You sense it in the way he gazes at the sky, not with admiration, but with cold calculation, as if every star were a nail, every constellation a structure to be built, not admired. He seeks not beauty, but completion. The longer you sail, the less human he seems. Not divine, merely stripped of all that is unnecessary, a function rather than a man. You imagine he could stand unmoving in a storm, the sea breaking against him without effect. A part of you envies that stillness, and a part dreads the sacrifices required to attain it. You dream of him sometimes, not clearly, just flashes, his silhouette against the night sky, his hands hovering over a map, his eyes reflecting the same gray as the sea. In the dream, he never speaks. He doesn't need to. His silence becomes the dream itself, vast, unending, without beginning or end. When you wake, the feeling lingers. The ship continues its slow, steady rhythm. The men go about their duties, and somewhere above or below, the captain moves unseen, shaping the very air around him without apparent effort. You realize you've begun working faster when he's near, even though he never directly observes you. The mere idea of his gaze carries weight. He isn't cruel, that would require emotion. He isn't kind, that would require indulgence. He simply is, like the mast, like the sea itself. The men call him El Capitan, but it's no longer just a name. It's a title that carries its own immense gravity. When it's spoken, conversation pauses for a breath, not out of fear, but out of recognition, the way one pauses at the threshold of a church before stepping inside. At dusk, the ship glows faintly gold beneath the sinking light. You see him there again, his hands resting on the rail, his face unreadable. The sky behind him is a deep blue, fading into black. The air smells of salt and smoke. He doesn't move as the last rays of sunlight vanish. He stands still, as though waiting for the world to fold itself neatly into darkness. You find yourself watching him longer than you intended, caught between curiosity and fatigue. The sea murmurs softly against the hull. The ropes sway, the lanterns flicker, and everything settles into its nightly order. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the steady rhythm of the water. When you open them again, he's gone, leaving behind only the faint impression of his shadow across the deck, long, thin, almost indistinguishable from the lines of the wood. You lie down, feeling the ship breathe beneath you. The air tastes faintly of iron. Somewhere above, the captain remains awake, charting a course no one else will ever fully understand. You know he's there, not because you hear him, but because the silence feels organized, deliberate. The sea continues to roll beneath the stars, and you drift along with it, a small shape in a vast design, moving under the unseen hand of a man who seems carved from the same material as destiny itself. And as sleep begins to claim you, you think, not in words, but in pure sensation, that perhaps this is what faith truly feels like. Not understanding, not hope, but surrender to the quiet certainty of another's will. Night doesn't fall anymore. It seeps in, a gradual dimming that feels less like the absence of light and more like the ship is slowly sinking into shadow. The lanterns are lit earlier now, yet the darkness arrives slower, heavier, as if reluctant to touch you. The sea stretches out flat and infinite, a black mirror reflecting a sky filled with unfamiliar stars. You don't recall when the old constellations vanished. They simply faded away, one by one, like forgotten names. In their place, strange patterns emerge. Crooked crosses, cold clusters, faint and pale as dust. The men stare at them with quiet unease, whispering that these stars move differently, that they watch rather than guide. If you gaze upon them for too long, your mind begins to drift, as if the sky itself were tilting. The air feels different here. The wind carries no scent, no hint of land or storm. It moves like breath, shallow and even, passing across your face without weight. The waves murmur softly against the hull, but even their rhythm has changed, becoming slower, more deliberate, like a creature pacing in its sleep. The ocean seems deeper now, as if the world beneath the surface has grown larger than the one above. You feel it in your bones, this shift, not dramatic, not sudden, just a steady change in the way sound travels, the way light fades, the way silence lingers between words. The ship no longer creaks in the same way. Its heartbeat has changed tempo, its lungs filled with foreign air. The ropes hum differently in the wind. You notice these things without conscious effort, the way you notice your own breathing. Magellan still walks the deck at night, his form outlined against the dim glow of the lanterns. Sometimes he stands beside the helmsman, his hand tracing lines in the air, as if mapping invisible borders between the stars. You watch from the shadows, observing the way his eyes reflect that pale southern light, sharp and distant. He doesn't seem to sleep anymore. None of you do, not really. The stars pulse faintly, their light thin and cold. They hang lower than before, almost within reach. You reach out a hand once, half awake, and for a moment it feels as if they might fall into your palm, tiny, weightless stones too fragile to touch. You lower your hand and feel the motion of the ship beneath you, slow and endless, carrying you farther and farther from everything you understand. The nights have grown longer, or perhaps the days have learned to hide. The horizon no longer glows with dawn as it once did. It just lightens slightly, the darkness bleeding into gray before sliding back again. The sun, when it appears, feels wrong, smaller, weaker, as though its light must travel farther to find you. You begin to notice how the cold settles into everything. It isn't sharp, not yet. It's a steady presence, a slow claiming. The deck holds the chill even after sunrise, the barrels sweat with it, your breath fogs faintly when you speak. The sea carries a pale shimmer, and when you touch the water, it feels denser than it should, as if touched by something ancient and unmoved. At night, the captain studies the sky in silence, marking positions on parchment that no longer make sense to you. The lines grow uncertain, the ink runs thin. You watch him fold each chart carefully, as if hiding a truth too fragile for daylight. The men no longer ask questions. They follow, and the sea continues. You lie on the deck sometimes when the duties are done. The stars overhead blur slightly, trembling with the motion of the ship. You can't name them, and yet they seem to know you, their cold glow settling on your face like the faint brush of snow. The light feels indifferent. There's something ancient in it, something that doesn't care for human ambition or suffering. It feels older than prayer. The voices of the crew have grown quieter. The laughter that once punctuated the monotony has thinned into murmurs. Conversations trail off halfway through. You hear snippets, half-dreamed fears, fragments of songs, but no one ever finishes. The words don't matter anymore. The sea absorbs them before they reach the air. Sometimes you think the ocean listens. When the wind dies and the sails hang limp, you can almost hear it breathing, slow, deliberate, enormous. The sound rises from beneath the hull, a low resonance that vibrates through the wood. It feels alive, patient, waiting. You can't say what for. The light of the stars reflects faintly on the water, breaking into tiny shards that ripple and fade. It's easy to lose focus staring at them. You start to imagine you're looking down into the sky rather than up at it, that the ship sails through two heavens, mirrored and endless, one above, one below. You're caught between them, suspended in quiet eternity. The cold deepens. It settles into your hands, your jaw, the spaces between breaths. When you move, it feels like dragging something invisible. The men huddle together at night, not for warmth, but for proof that they still exist. The sea offers no reflection anymore, only darkness, thick and opaque. The cook speaks of strange lights on the horizon, green, he says, flickering like lanterns underwater. You go to look, but there's nothing, only the faint shimmer of starlight distorted by mist. Yet, even when you see nothing, the idea stays with you. You start to notice faint glimmers in the corner of your vision, gone when you turn your head. Melon's shadow grows longer with each night. He stands at the bow sometimes, alone, motionless for hours. His silhouette merges with the mast, black against the starlight. You begin to think he might be drawing strength from the darkness, feeding on the cold itself. The men glance at him and look away quickly, afraid of what they might see if they stare too long. The ocean takes on new colors, not the deep blue you once knew, but layers of gray and silver, shades of iron and smoke. The waves move slower, as if dragging against something unseen. Even the foam feels different, thicker, clinging to the ship like hands reluctant to let go. Days become indistinguishable. Each sunrise bleeds into mist, each night sinks into the same vast dark. The stars are your only companions, yet their constellations shift imperceptibly each evening. It feels like the world above is turning while the one below stands still. The sky moves on, you remain. You dream differently now. When sleep comes, it isn't gentle. It arrives like fog, heavy, directionless. You dream of water without end, of faces blurred by starlight, of voices calling from somewhere deep and far away. In the dream, you always look up, but the stars keep changing places. When you wake, you aren't sure if you've truly left the dream at all. One evening, as the ship drifts under a pale crescent moon, you notice the air hums faintly, a vibration that isn't wind or wave, a tone low and steady, threading through the night. It comes from nowhere and everywhere. The men hear it too, but no one speaks. You all stand still, listening. It fades only when the first star falls, a tiny flare that vanishes before touching the horizon. You start to wonder how long you've been sailing beneath this new sky. The days are too alike to count. The sea no longer feels like a place you travel through. It feels like something you inhabit, endless and self-contained, a moving prison, or perhaps a cradle. It's hard to tell the difference anymore. The stars watch in silence. Their light doesn't comfort, it judges nothing, blesses nothing. It simply exists, calm, eternal, unreachable. You imagine them as the eyes of ancient gods, watching your small ship crawl across the black surface of their forgotten sea. One night, the captain orders the lanterns extinguished. The ship sinks into pure darkness. You can't see the men beside you, you can't see your hands. Only the stars remain, thousands of them, shimmering faintly, their reflections trembling in the water. The ship becomes invisible, a thought, adrift in the void. For the first time, you feel the full weight of your insignificance. It isn't frightening, it's almost a relief. The constellations move above you, slow and deliberate. You realize they don't need to guide you. They've been watching this path long before any man dared to name it. The ship creaks softly, surrendering to their rhythm. The sea exhales, and the world drifts a little farther into stillness. You close your eyes and breathe in the air, cold, metallic, endless. The stars press against your eyelids, leaving faint ghost lights behind them. You can't tell if you're awake or dreaming anymore. Perhaps it doesn't matter. The voyage has no borders now, no end, no return, only motion, only the sound of water and the quiet turning of the sky. And somewhere above or below, the stars shift again, tracing invisible paths over a world that has already forgotten its name. The sea has grown quieter. It moves without sound now, a vast sheet of colorless glass that hides its depths too well. The air feels thinner, as if the world itself were slowly running out of breath. You move slower, too, not from caution, but from the heaviness that has begun to reside inside your bones. The wind doesn't bring news anymore, it only brings itself. The biscuits have turned to powder. When you bite them, they dissolve on your tongue like dust from the earth you left behind. The salted meat gleams faintly with rot, a gray sheen, slick and sour. You eat it anyway. Hunger no longer feels like pain. It's quieter now, a steady presence that hums just below thought. You chew because that's what the body demands, you swallow because it's what survival looks like, even when it no longer feels like living. The water has gone stale. It carries the taste of rust and patience, as though it, too, has been waiting too long to be used. You sip it carefully, pretending it still refreshes. Some of the men add vinegar to mask the taste, but that only makes it worse, sharper, biting. You drink because there's nothing else, because thirst doesn't negotiate. The cook used to hum while he worked. He doesn't anymore. His fire burns smaller now, cautious and unwilling, as if afraid of being noticed. The air below deck smells of damp wood, of brine, of a faint decay that clings to every surface. You can't escape it. It seeps into the ropes, into your clothes, into your sleep. Days pass without change, though the sun grows weaker with each one. Its light spills over the sea like something tired, unable to reach the surface fully. Shadows grow soft, indistinct. You've stopped trying to tell the hours apart. The bell rings and you move. You don't think. Routine has become a kind of mercy. When the food is passed around, you take your share carefully, not because you're polite, but because everyone has learned to measure greed. The crew no longer speaks much during meals. The sound of chewing fills the silence, a slow, grim rhythm that feels older than speech. Occasionally, someone mutters a joke about boiling leather. No one laughs, but a few look down at their boots all the same. Your stomach has shrunk. You can feel it tightening each day, like a hand closing around itself. The hunger moves differently now, less urgent, more patient, spreading quietly through your chest and into your thoughts. It becomes a rhythm you can't ignore, a pulse that beats beneath every movement. When you sleep, you dream of color, of bread warm from the oven, meat rich and red, fruit that drips sweetness down your wrist. You wake to gray water, gray sky, gray faces. The men's voices have changed. They sound thinner, stretched, as if each word costs something. Laughter has become a ghost. You hear it sometimes, faint and brittle, the echo of what it used to be. Jokes circle the same dark corners. Food, madness, God. No one mentions home anymore. The word has lost its meaning out here, somewhere between hunger and horizon. You start to notice how your hands tremble when you tie the ropes, not from cold, but from weakness. The muscles move slower now, reluctant. You hide it as best you can, everyone does. To show how empty you've become feels dangerous, like revealing a wound that invites the knife. At night, the ship breathes with you. Its creaks have softened, its voice grown frail. You lie awake listening to it, the wood settling under the weight of the voyage. The stars above blur into one another, faint and cold. You can't tell if it's the fog in your eyes or the sky itself fading. Sometimes a man collapses quietly, no ceremony, no warning, just a sound, a small, hollow thud against the deck. The others carry him below without a word. You don't ask if he'll rise again. You know better now than to expect answers from a world this empty. You think about time differently these days. It no longer moves forward. It sinks like an anchor into dark water. You can feel it gathering weight, dragging the ship deeper into something you can't see. The ocean stretches endlessly in every direction, the same dull skin of moving glass. It feels like being trapped inside a heartbeat that has forgotten how to stop. The smell of spoiled meat follows you everywhere. It hides in your clothes, clings to your hair. You grow used to it until you catch a moment of clean air, a rare breeze that smells of nothing, and the contrast makes you dizzy. You breathe deeper than you mean to, almost desperate. Then it's gone again, swallowed by the same invisible rot that defines your days. There's a strange kind of comfort in repetition, the same movements, the same labor, the same hollow meals. You begin to understand how people become ghosts while still alive, not through death, but through sameness. The world becomes smaller, your body quieter. You move, you eat, you sleep, but the self begins to thin, like light stretched too far. You catch yourself talking to the sea sometimes, your voice barely a whisper, not words exactly, more like sound just to hear something human. The water doesn't answer. It never does, but it listens always. You can feel it listening, patient and vast. The captain still appears on deck, his expression unreadable. He's thinner too, though his eyes haven't lost their edge. When he speaks, it feels like hearing a voice from another world, one that still remembers what purpose sounds like. The crew obeys without question, not from faith, but from the exhaustion of choice. One morning, you find a rat dead beside a barrel. The men gather around it silently, not out of disgust, but out of longing. Someone murmurs a prayer under their breath. Another crew member casts a glance at the cook, who pointedly looks away, avoiding their gaze. No one dares to touch the rat's corpse, not yet. But the same grim thought resonates in everyone's mind. A body is a body, and hunger is an ancient, pitiless god that cares nothing for names or reputations. You feel a pang of shame for even considering it, but the feeling is fleeting. Hunger is a solvent, dissolving everything in its path. Fear, pride, decency, it strips you bare, leaving only the raw, gnawing need. You begin to grasp how easily men can transform into something else. When the body forgets the memory of comfort, the sea no longer punishes. It simply reveals the depths of desperation within. When the last of the biscuits are gone, the cook scrapes the barrel, desperately seeking crumbs. You line up, hope abandoned, hands outstretched like beggars before a forgotten temple. He shakes his head before you even reach him. The barrel is empty. The sound it makes when he taps it, hollow, final, echoes through the ship like a death knell. That night, sleep eludes everyone. Even the sea is unnaturally still. The air hangs heavy, thick with a metallic tang and the weight of silence. Someone begins to pray softly, the words tumbling over one another in a desperate, shapeless plea. Others join in, their voices weaving into a low, mournful hum. It sounds less like an expression of faith and more like a lament for the lost. You close your eyes and conjure an image of land, any land. Grass beneath your feet, trees laden with fruit, air that doesn't taste of salt and despair. You can almost feel it, the solid, unwavering presence of earth. But when you open your eyes, there is only the sea, endless and indifferent. The illusion vanishes like water slipping through your fingers. Days blur together until the very concept of a day loses all meaning. The sun is merely a faint, ghostly smudge in the sky. You've stopped counting meals, stopped marking the passage of time. You exist in slow motion, breath by breath, bite by bite, heartbeat by heartbeat. The cook begins boiling strips of canvas in salt water. This time, no one makes jokes. The acrid, bitter smell permeates the deck. You chew the boiled leather with painstaking care, each bite a battle against your gag reflex. It doesn't taste like food, but it gives your jaw something to do, a hollow exercise. The body seems to confuse motion with sustenance. One of the men laughs as he eats, a dry, cracked sound that borders on a sob. You almost envy him that small spark of life. At least the sound reminds him he's still alive. Most of you have forgotten what that feels like. Hunger has transformed you. It's no longer an intruder, an unwelcome guest. It's a companion now. Quiet, persistent, faithful. It no longer asks for permission. It simply remains. You move through your tasks in a fog, the world narrowing to the space between one swallow and the next. The ship carries you onward, though onward holds no promise now. The sea remains the same, the sky unchanging. Only your bodies shrink, your faces hollow, your eyes deepening into wells that reflect more than they reveal. And through it all, the ocean keeps whispering that slow, rhythmic murmur that fills the gaps between your thoughts. You begin to suspect it isn't mocking you, it's waiting. For what, you don't know. You fall asleep one night with the taste of salt on your lips and awaken to the same taste again. Nothing changes. The stars remain fixed in their positions, and the ship continues to drift through the emptiness. Hunger persists, slow and patient, as eternal as the sea itself. And in that stillness, you begin to grasp what it truly means to endure. Not to conquer, not even to survive, but simply to continue breathing while the world around you forgets how. The sea undergoes a subtle transformation before you consciously notice it. Its color darkens, deepening into something more solid, as though the water itself has grown weary of being fluid. The air thickens, too, infused with the scent of earth and decay, faint at first, then growing stronger until it fills your lungs like a forgotten memory. You stand at the rail, squinting through the mist, and there it is, land. It doesn't announce its arrival with fanfare. There's no clear dividing line between ocean and earth, only the gradual emergence of shape. Trees rise out of the fog, dark and unmoving, their reflections trembling on the surface of the water. The men gather beside you, their faces gaunt and unreadable. The sight should stir joy, but it doesn't. You all stare as if the world has sprouted an extra limb, and you're unsure whether to be amazed or terrified. The forest waits in silence. It looks untouched, unbothered, unwilling to offer a welcome. The leaves shimmer faintly beneath a pale sun, and the shore is marked by thick mud that gleams like oil. The sound of the sea meeting it is soft and reluctant, like two entities forced into contact that never desired to meet. Someone mutters that it looks like the edge of the world. Someone else says, maybe it is. No one laughs. The wind carries the mingled sense of vegetation and decay, a sharp, wet greenness that feels overwhelmingly alive after the staleness of the ship. You breathe it in anyway. It burns a little, reminding you that your lungs still remember how to crave more than just salt air. Magellan stands at the bow, unmoving, silent. His gaze is fixed on the shore, as though he's deciphering something written there that remains invisible to everyone else. The men whisper about what might lie beyond the treeline, gold, giants, new gods, or, even worse, nothing at all. You say nothing. You only watch the fog breathe across the water, folding over itself like a living thing. The ship slows, its sails hanging loose and exhausted. The creak of the rigging echoes strangely against the trees. You hear birds, distant, unsettling cries that sound unlike any you've ever known. Their calls seem to originate from the very air itself, not from any throat. The sound lingers, metallic and haunting in its indifference. A boat is lowered into the water. The oars dip in silence, each stroke measured and careful, as if afraid of awakening something dormant. You watch the men move toward the shore, their bodies appearing small and insignificant against the vast stillness. When they reach the mud, they hesitate. No one steps forward. For a long moment, they simply stand there, shapes in the mist, blending into the scenery. Eventually, one of them takes a step. The others follow. From the deck, you watch them disappear into the trees, their shapes vanishing quickly, swallowed by the green. The sound of their movements fades, replaced by the low hum of insects and the sigh of leaves rubbing against each other. You keep watching, waiting for them to return. Time stretches. The tide creeps in with small, slow gestures, as though reluctant to leave the shore. When the boat returns, it carries nothing new, just the men, their eyes distant, their hands empty. They speak quietly to the captain, who nods once, his expression unchanged. The words spread among the crew, soft, confused, carried by curiosity rather than urgency. There were people, they say, tall, painted, quiet. They didn't speak, didn't flee. They only watched from the trees. And when one of the sailors raised a hand in greeting, they turned and melted away into the green, soundless. Night descends quickly. The forest glows faintly in the moonlight, the leaves reflecting silver, the trunks black as pitch. Fires are lit on deck, small and controlled. You sit near one, the warmth barely perceptible against the damp air. The men speak in hushed voices, their faces illuminated in the orange glow of the flames. The talk drifts from wonder to superstition. Someone says the forest moves at night, that he saw shadows where there were none. Someone else claims he heard laughter, faint, but undeniably human. No one argues. You tilt your head back and gaze at the stars. They seem wrong here, too numerous, too sharp, arranged in patterns that feel unfamiliar. The sky itself seems larger, stretched thin over this unmarked place. You try to trace the constellations you once knew, but they no longer fit. The heavens have redrawn themselves, and you no longer belong to them. When you close your eyes, the sound of the forest remains with you. It possesses its own unique rhythm, a heartbeat that pulses through roots and leaves. You dream of walking beneath those trees, the ground soft beneath your feet, the air wet against your skin. You dream of eyes watching from the darkness, not cruel, just filled with a quiet knowing. When you wake, you feel as though you've forgotten something important, something the forest tried to tell you, and you failed to understand. The next morning, fog lies thick across the water, a pale curtain that blurs everything. The ship feels smaller within it, a ghost adrift in a sea of whiteness. You can hear the forest, but you can't see it. Branches creak faintly. Somewhere, a bird screams once, then falls silent. The men move slower than usual, their eyes darting nervously toward the shore. The silence feels heavier than hunger ever did. Magellan orders another landing. This time, more men go ashore, and you are among them. The air grows heavier as you approach the land, thick with the scent of sap and mud. The oars make soft, wet sounds that blend with your breathing. When your boots touch the ground, it yields slightly, sinking beneath your weight. The mud clings to you as if reluctant to let you go. The forest looms ahead, dense and alive. You step into it, and the world transforms. The air is still, unmoving. The light filters through the leaves in fragmented shades of green. Every sound feels amplified. The crack of a branch, the scrape of cloth, the pounding of your own heart in your ears. Insects hum in a constant, unwavering rhythm. You walk carefully, though you're not sure why. The place feels sentient, aware of each step you take. There are signs of life. Huts woven from reeds, the remnants of a fire, bones cleaned meticulously and stacked with care. But there are no people, only the lingering traces of their presence. The warmth gone, but the shape remaining. You run your fingers along the bark of a tree marked with red pigment. The pattern means nothing to you, but perhaps it was never meant to. When the men speak, their voices sound jarring here, too loud, too sharp. The forest seems to recoil from them. You suddenly understand why the people watched in silence. To speak in a place like this feels intrusive, a violation. You begin to feel it, too. The pull toward silence, the urge to vanish into the green. Something moves between the trees. You catch only a glimpse of it, a shape tall and slender, gone before your eyes can fully adjust. You look around. The others saw it too, but no one moves. The forest swallows the moment whole, leaving nothing but stillness. When you return to the shore, the captain is waiting. You tell him there was nothing. He nods, unsurprised. Orders are given. The ship will sail on at dawn. The men grumble softly, but they obey. None of you look back toward the forest. It doesn't feel right to. That night, the fog thickens until it seems to press against your skin. The sea barely moves, as if holding its breath. You lie awake listening to it, waiting for some sound, the crack of a branch, the whisper of movement. But there's nothing, only the slow creak of wood and the faint hum of your pulse. When dawn arrives, the fog lifts just enough to reveal the coastline fading behind you. The trees recede into the distance, swallowed by the morning light. You watch until they disappear completely, until the sea reclaims the horizon. The men speak quietly about what they saw. Some claim to have glimpsed idols carved into rock. Others say they saw nothing but fog. The truth feels irrelevant. What matters is the leaving, that slow retreat from something that didn't care whether you came or went. The ship moves on, catching a thin wind. The water ahead is pale blue, smooth as glass. Behind you, the world folds in on itself again, unmarked, untouched, already forgetting your presence. As the coastline fades, a strange thought drifts through your mind. Maybe maps aren't for finding places, but for naming the unknown. Maybe the world only becomes real when you draw lines on it. And maybe this place, the edge of everything you've known, is better left without lines at all. You stand at the railing until the fog swallows the last hint of land. The men begin their work in silence. The ropes tighten, the sails shift, and the ship groans softly as it turns toward the open sea once more. The horizon stretches ahead, endless and pale. The air grows lighter, thinner. You breathe deeply, trying to capture the scent of the forest still lingering in your lungs. But it's gone, replaced once again by salt, wood, and the faint, unchanging taste of distance. You close your eyes. The world hums around you, the steady rhythm of water, wood, and wind. The forest fades behind you like a dream you were never meant to remember. Ahead, the sea waits, vast, indifferent, and quiet, as if daring you to keep believing. There's still more to find. The sea has grown narrow, and so has time. You stand near the bow, your breath catching in the cold, like smoke that refuses to rise. Around you, the water has changed its voice. It no longer sings in deep, patient rhythms. It mutters, low and broken, pressed between cliffs of stone and ice. The ship groans with each gust of wind, as if the wood itself knows this passage was never meant for men. You had once believed the ocean was infinite. Now it feels like a throat closing. The strait twists before you, its edges clawing into the fog. The world narrows into a corridor of fear, the unknown pressing in from both sides. The wind cuts like a blade drawn across your skin, and your hands, stiff with salt and cold, no longer feel like your own. Every rope, every knot, every pull is slower now. The deck is rimmed with frost. The barrels you once counted with steady hands are swollen, cracked, and leaking brine. The sea claims what you once thought was yours. The captain does not shiver. His coat snaps in the wind like a flag that refuses to bow. You watch him from a distance, as you always do, his silhouette a stark figure against the pale, endless white of morning. Magellan seems made for this silence, this cruelty. You wonder if he feels it too. The weight of this place where even sound freezes before reaching another ear. No one speaks much anymore. Words have become like rations, spent carefully, measured out. The men's faces have turned gray, their eyes hollowed by too many dawns that look exactly the same. You can't remember when the sun last felt warm. The horizon no longer burns gold. It burns nothing at all, just a dull smear of light that offers no promise. You once believed the sea was alive, full of hidden creatures and secret depths. But here it feels dead, a mirror reflecting your own exhaustion. Even the gulls have vanished. Only the wind remains, relentless, unkind, whispering through the rigging like a prayer no one believes in anymore. When the storm comes, it doesn't arrive with thunder or rage. It arrives quietly, a curtain of sleep that turns the air into glass. The sails stiffen, the ropes crack. You move with the others, numb, half-blind, shouting without hearing your own voice. Each wave is a hand reaching up to pull the ship backward. The mast bends, but does not break, not yet. Night falls without darkness, just a thicker gray. You tie yourself to the railing, because that is what the older sailors do, and you've stopped questioning why. The deck tilts, the cold bites, and for a moment, as the ship lurches into the black, you think of home, not as a place, but as a warmth your body still remembers. A man slips that night. His name doesn't matter. You hear the splash, the brief cry swallowed by the wind, and then nothing. No one moves to the edge. The sea takes its due. Silence returns, heavier than before. By morning, the ropes are sheathed in ice so clear it looks like glass blown by unseen hand. You run your palm along it and feel nothing. Your fingers have forgotten the language of touch. Everything has turned to ritual. The scraping of frost, the pulling of lines, the chewing of stale biscuit that splinters in your mouth like bone. You've learned not to think too far ahead. Time moves differently here. It stretches thin, loses its shape. The days fold into one another until they no longer matter. You measure them instead by small things. The creak that changes in pitch, the breath of wind that feels a little less cruel, the faint glow that tells you the sun still exists somewhere beyond the fog. Sometimes at night, when the ship drifts slower through the channel, you lie awake below deck. The wood above you moans softly, like a living creature dreaming in its sleep. You listen for that sound because it reminds you that you're still moving, even if you don't know where. You think about the maps, those sheets of paper drawn by hands that never felt this cold. Their lines are clean, confident, untouched by salt or fear. Somewhere on one of those maps, this place doesn't yet exist. You are part of the ink that will make it real. The thought brings no pride, only a quiet ache. You wonder if being the first to suffer something makes it noble or simply foolish. Melon's voice cuts through the wind some nights, sharp and certain. You don't understand how he still believes in direction, in destiny, in something beyond this endless gray. But belief has become a kind of heat. You borrow what you can from it, just enough to keep moving. There's talk of turning back, whispers passed in the dark, muttered behind barrels, beneath breath. You don't join them, not because you disagree, but because the words themselves feel too heavy. Hope and rebellion sound the same here. Both cost too much. Then comes a day when the wind stops. Just stop. The stillness is worse than any storm. The ship hangs in the water like an insect trapped in glass. The men look at one another as if waiting for the world to start again. You can hear everything now: the faint drip of melting ice, the sigh of a man asleep, the small creak of your own boots shifting. It's unbearable. You stare at the horizon, half expecting it to move. It doesn't. The world is silent. The world is still. You wonder if this is how death begins. Not with a scream, but with the quiet refusal of motion. When the wind returns, it feels like forgiveness. The sails swell, the ropes tighten, and the ship stirs again. The men breathe as if waking from a dream, but the relief is brief. The cold remains, the hunger deepens, and the sky continues to hang low and colorless. You realize something then. It isn't the sea you fear anymore. It's the waiting, the slow erosion of what makes you human. You have become part of the ship, another sound in its chorus of creaks and sighs. The thought both comforts and frightens you. Days or weeks, you can't tell. Later, the cliffs begin to widen. The wind smells different. The water turns from steel gray to something almost blue. You feel it before you see it, the subtle shift, the loosening of the air. The strait is ending. The world impossibly continues. No one cheers, no one dares. The ocean beyond lies wide and bright, a mirror stretching to the edge of imagination. But you know better than to call it freedom. You've learned that every horizon only hides another kind of confinement. As the ship glides toward open water, you look back once. The mountains fade into the mist, the narrow path swallowed by distance. It feels like leaving a grave you built for yourself. The cold lingers in your bones, refusing to thaw. You close your eyes and let the wind find your face. It's softer now, almost kind. The taste of salt on your lips is the same as it has always been, bitter, endless, necessary. Somewhere behind you, the strait sighs. Ahead, the unknown waits, not as a promise, but as a question that no one aboard dares to answer. You breathe slowly. The ropes creak, the sails fill, and the ship moves on, carrying your hunger, your silence, your fading sense of self, into the next stretch of sea, where even the stars will change their names again. The strait disappears behind you, swallowed by fog and memory. The wind has softened to a faint hum, and the waves move with a languid patience that makes your arms ache from the weight of doing nothing. The ship floats, a small wooden thought, adrift on a vast sheet of glass that stretches in every direction. There is no horizon to reach, only the blue, unbroken, unyielding, merciless in its stillness. Days lose their names here. You no longer know which sun is rising or setting, only that the light shifts imperceptibly across the water. The ocean is so calm it has forgotten how to move, and you fear that you might forget as well. Each breath is an effort against the monotony. Even the waves seem lazy in their endless repetition, like tired ghosts swimming just beneath the surface. The men drift in silence. Some sit on barrels, staring into the water as though it will speak if given enough attention. Some pace the deck, hands empty, shoulders rounded beneath coats stiff with salt and cold. They speak little, but when they do, the words are soft, uncertain, often half-formed. You listen, counting syllables, trying to remember what conversation once sounded like. Most of it dissolves in the air before it reaches you. Food has become another form of ritual. You chew slowly, mechanically, tasting salt, rot, and fatigue, but little else. The cook moves among the barrels with quiet determination, scraping every bit of old biscuit, measuring water with exacting care. His face is lined with shadows. He does not complain. No one does. You have all learned that complaint only sharpens the edges of hunger, makes the cold more cruel. Time bends here. A day stretches into another. Hours fold into themselves. You start to feel the ship's movement as part of your own body. The slight rocking becomes the rhythm of your pulse. The push of water against hull, the cadence of your thoughts. Sleep is shallow, fragmentary, measured in moments that rise and fall with the tides. Even dreaming has slowed. You remember color only vaguely. The brown of old biscuit, the gray of salted meat, the pale gleam of rope slick with brine. You watch the water, and sometimes you see faces there, not yours, not really, but faces that echo across the mirror surface, pale and indistinct. They smile, they frown, they watch. You cannot tell. You lean closer, and they vanish. Sometimes it is a man from the crew, flattened and stretched by the reflection. Sometimes it is a stranger, someone you might have known before the voyage long ago, in another world. All of them fade like rumor. The air has its own texture here, not sharp or bracing, not wet with spray or soot, but a slow, dense calm that fills every corner of the deck. It presses against your skin, your lungs, your thoughts. Breathing becomes an act of patience. You notice every small sound. A rope creaking, a nail straining, the faintest sigh of wood settling underweight. They all seem louder now, precious for their difference from total silence. The captain walks the deck with his usual quiet authority. Magellan seems unaffected by the monotony. He paces, his gaze distant, tracing lines in the water that do not exist. You watch him, understanding that belief here has a different meaning, not hope, not trust, but the act of continuing to. Even when the world remains unchanged, you continue to move. The men sometimes talk amongst themselves about what awaits them, whispering of distant islands, favorable trade winds, and lands where food might be plentiful. You listen, but their words sound empty, unreal, like whispers carried across the water without substance. They disappear before reaching you, much like fog dissolving over the ocean's glassy surface. When a bird appears, a mere speck, a fleeting shadow against the vast sky, it triggers a surge of feeling you can't quite name. The men point, chuckle softly, and gesture with a renewed energy, but the moment is brief. The bird vanishes, and the ocean settles back into its slow, unforgiving calm. You remember forests at the edge of maps, the strait with its brutal winds. You recall the ice, the gnawing hunger, the faint earthy scent of mud and decaying leaves, and then even those memories fade. Only the blue remains. The ropes are damp beneath your hands, not from seawater, but from condensation drawn from the seemingly endless fog. You trace their texture with your fingers, seeking something tangible, something real. The deck beneath your feet no longer feels familiar. Each plank is now a surface to be trod cautiously. You calculate the distance between yourself and the ship's rail. You measure the ever-growing distance between yourself and your own fading memories. Sleep comes and goes in fragmented pieces. Dreams are shallow, fleeting. You dream of towering cliffs, dense forests, and mouths filled with fresh, nourishing food. You awaken to the same salt, the same all-encompassing blue, the unbroken rhythm of the ship as it presses onward. The same ropes, the same barrels, the same quiet murmur of men who have grown thinner, quieter, and prematurely older, though years haven't truly passed. You wake each day wondering if you are still the person who departed Seville, or if the sea has gradually erased your identity, writing over your very name. Conversations, when they occur, often descend into absurdity. The men offer observations about the shapes of clouds, the precise color of the sky, the crests and troughs of the wave. They exchange hushed jokes about things that defy reality, about the ship itself, about the constellations above, which have long since rearranged into patterns unknown to them. Their laughter is gentle, almost reverent, more a sign of mutual recognition that they are still alive than an expression of true mirth. Time has hollowed the crew, hollowed the ship, hollowed you as well. You move because your body compels you, speak because your tongue still knows how, breathe because your lungs automatically perform their function, not because you consciously feel the need. Even hope has settled into a rhythm. Slow, methodical, predictable. You mark the passing days by subtle shifts in the wind, by the minute differences in hue between sky and water, by the ever-present pull of salt on your lips. You notice minute details with an ever-increasing intensity, a rope frayed in an intricate pattern, a nail loosened from its place in the deck, the shimmering frost that forms when the air cools at night. Each observation is a lifeline to the world you can still touch. Every sense is stretched to its limit, finding significance in what amounts to almost nothing. The horizon curves, but never truly ends. Leaning over the rail, you gaze into the smooth, mirror-like water, trying to see beyond your own reflection. You touch the surface with your fingertips, cold, vast, unresponsive. Your own face appears momentarily, gaunt and familiar, before dissolving back into the blue. The men beside you have become shadows, nearly indistinguishable from the ship itself. At times you conjure images of land, not true land, but a memory or a tale from a life long past. You envision forests, rivers, people, and animals. For a fleeting moment you see them clearly, vibrant in color and movement, and then the blue returns, swallowing the vision and leaving only the monotonous calm. You exhale, wondering if this is what eternity must feel like. Magellan appears at the bow one evening, as the wind dies down and the water becomes perfectly still. He points silently toward the horizon, then lowers his hand. You follow his gesture, but see nothing. Stillness reigns supreme. And yet the crew obeys, adjusting the sails, securing the ropes, moving as if guided by an invisible hand, even when one doesn't exist. You realize that the voyage has undergone a transformation. It's no longer about reaching a specific place, discovering a new coast, or even returning home. It's about endurance, about existing in a world that resists change, about measuring life not by the distance traveled, but by each breath taken against the backdrop of infinite stillness. The stars above shift imperceptibly over weeks, faint, unfamiliar, too distant to ever be reached. You chart them in your mind, silently naming them, knowing that the names are ultimately meaningless. Still, you name them. Still, you move through the blue void beneath them, one small human amidst countless miles of unbroken water. Occasionally, the cry of a gull pierces the calm, startling, almost unbearable in its rarity. The crew murmurs softly, and the ship creaks in acknowledgement, a single voice in the overwhelming quiet. Then silence returns, complete, infinite, relentless. Standing at the rail, you watch your reflection blur into the water, the world narrowing to this confined space where time bends and memory fade. Even your own sense of self begins to feel like a rumor, a whispered echo of the person who signed his name on a piece of paper back in Seville, a body adrift on an endless expanse of blue, sustained only by routine, by ritual, by the necessity of doing something rather than nothing. The ship drifts onward. The blue stretches further than the eye can see. The men are as quiet as you are. The wind hums through the rigging in a familiar tone, a lullaby, a constant reminder that the world continues its course even as the self recedes. You breathe, you move, you survive. And above it all, the unbroken sea waits, endless, impartial, and patient, holding everything and everyone in its slow, merciless rhythm. The blue stretches endlessly, and then, at long last, it ends. A dark line emerges from the horizon, blurred at first, then gradually clearer, until trees appear as a wall of vibrant green, heavy with promise. You breathe differently now, as if the air itself has softened, warmed, and for a fleeting moment, the constant tension in your shoulders eases. The monotony of the ocean breaks with a gentle lapping of waves against the sand, a rhythm that doesn't demand constant vigilance. The men are alert, yet quieter than usual, a strange reverence in their movements, a cautious excitement masked as patience. You lower a rope, watching the shoreline approach, and notice the scent. Rich, wet earth, sweet fruit, and the distant aroma of wood smoke. It feels almost like coming home, though you can't quite place the memory it evokes. When the small boats reach the sand, the people are there waiting. They are not openly hostile, at least. Their eyes are curious, calm, and their voices sound like music composed for the sun. You trade trinkets, bits of metal, and glass beads for food. Bananas heavy with sweetness, fish still glistening, and water that tastes so fresh it makes your stomach ache with remembered longing. The men eat slowly, almost reverentially, savoring this brief reprieve. You do too. The forest behind them is dense, green, and teeming with a life that feels almost aggressive after months at sea. You notice the intricate details. The curve of a leaf, the way sunlight filters through the canopy, the faint, constant hum of insects. The people move among the trees effortlessly, like spirits who belong to them. They show you the paths, the small shelters, piles of coconuts, and nets strung between palm trees. Everything here seems measured, careful, yet inexhaustible. You feel something strange, relief. For the first time in months, perhaps since leaving the strait, the world isn't pressing down on you. The sun warms your face, the breeze lifts your hair, and you feel the steady, grounded presence of the earth beneath your boots. You notice how thin the line is between wonder and forgetfulness, between gratitude and longing for what will inevitably vanish when the ship calls you back. The men trade quietly. Some offer small gifts, others exchange smiles, all of them silent witnesses to the unspoken truth. The sea does not forgive. The food, the warmth, the soft laughter are all temporary. You sense it in the way the wind shifts, in the subtle inclination of a tree bending toward the ocean, in the quiet patience of the water. The ship waits always, even as you eat and breathe. Part of you scans the horizon, the distant swell of waves beyond the bay. You imagine the ropes, the sails, the rigging straining against the wind. You imagine the crew still aboard, moving in their slow, methodical rhythm. You remember the hunger, the cold, the endless blue, and you realize that this moment of respite is merely a thin layer of warmth over the ceaseless weight of the voyage. The people speak to you, their words foreign but melodic. You learn their names slowly, and they learn yours, or at least something you offer in its place. You feel gratitude, but it's intertwined with suspicion, an instinct honed by months at sea. You've learned that kindness can be as fragile as bread in a storm. You measure every gesture, every smile, as if testing whether it will endure when the ship returns to the open sea. The food nourishes you, but more importantly, it reminds you of what was lost to the monotony of open water: strength, color, and the simple satisfaction of needs met. You chew slowly, noticing the texture, the taste, the way each swallow slides down your throat, grounding you in the present moment. You remember hunger, not just as an absence, but as a stark contrast. The emptiness you carried before arriving here feels sharper now, a void you cannot entirely fill. Some of the men wander along the shoreline, running their fingers over the sand, the bark of trees, and nets left to dry in the sun. They speak softly, trying to name everything they see, as if language could capture the gentle beauty of these islands. You notice how their voices are lighter, how their movements possess a rhythm they had lost months ago. The ship, suspended behind the bay, remains still, waiting silently, patient and insistent. Standing at the edge of the forest, you watch a man offer a bead to a child, and you recognize something in his gesture: hope, or at least its reflection. For a moment, the voyage feels less like a punishment. You allow yourself to imagine the ship's sails furled, the sea calmed, a life built on abundance rather than mere endurance. But the fantasy is fleeting. You know that the ship waits, and it will inevitably claim you again. It always does. The forest is alive with small sounds: a bird's trill, the rustle of leaves, the faint drip of water from the canopy to the ground. You follow a path inland briefly, tracing it with your eyes and your feet, but you cannot linger. The ship calls you back, and with each step toward the boat, the forest recedes, becomes less solid, less permanent. You carry the memory with you, but its weight is already tinged with loss. The people offer you fruits you've never seen before, fish prepared with care and skill, and water drawn from hidden streams. You taste them, and for the first time, sustenance feels like more than just survival. But even as you eat, you cannot ignore the ropes, the sails, the faint creak of the ship against the tide. Your body has learned the rhythm of the voyage, and you cannot forget it, even in these moments of abundance. You trade names for smiles and trinkets for food. You listen to laughter that carries effortlessly on the breeze. And yet, every moment is tempered by memory. The endless blue sea, the cold fingers of the strait, the hunger that never fully disappears. You understand that the kindness here is borrowed from the sun, from the earth, from a world that has nothing to do with you. It is real, yes, but it is also temporary. The men return to the ship reluctantly, their hands full, their faces heavy with unspoken longing. You follow them, feeling the tug of both home and duty. The forest recedes behind you, its green swallowed by mist and distance. You hear the laughter fade, the air returning to salt and wind. The promise of warmth is gone, replaced once again by the rhythm of rope and sail, the ship pulling across water that grants no forgiveness. Standing on deck, clutching your handfuls of fruit and fresh water, you watch the island shrink into the horizon. Its kindness lingers faintly on your tongue and in your throat, a memory that tastes like sun and mud and hope. But the ship waits always. The ropes creak, the sails catch the wind, the ocean hums beneath the hull. You breathe in the last scent of the island deeply, knowing that this reprieve, however sweet, is already behind you. As the sails fill and the bow points toward open water, you feel the weight of both the gift and the debt. The island was kind, but the voyage is relentless. Stepping back from the railing, you take note of the ropes beneath your hands, the deck under your boots, the horizon stretching endlessly blue. The forest fades behind you, the laughter swallowed by the distance, the fruit already absorbed into your body, its sweetness fleeting. Closing your eyes, you can almost hear the voices of the island, the murmur of wind through the trees, the soft ripple of water on the sand, and then it's gone. Only the ship, only the sea, only the endless rhythm remains. You move forward because you must, guided by routine, by ritual, by the pull of a world that knows no pause. And in the quiet, you understand once more that the ocean forgives nothing. Every kindness is borrowed, every warmth is temporary. And yet, you endure, carrying memories like fragile cargo, trading smiles for sustenance, and continuing on into the blue that stretches without end. The sun rises pale and listless over the endless blue. You notice it because its light brushes your face differently today, softer but somehow empty, as if the sky itself has realized something has been lost. A message reaches the crew quietly, carried by whispers that seem to trail off before fully registering. Magellan is dead. The words arrive not as a shock, but as an inevitability. You do not flinch, you do not cry, you only feel the emptiness they leave behind, a subtle folding inward, as if a hinge has rusted in your chest. It feels distant, like hearing that a star has died light years away. Its light will eventually reach you, but in this moment it's nothing more than a quiet shift in the state of the world. The ship rocks gently, unmindful of human grief. It does not slow, does not stop. The wind passes through the sails without hesitation. The water laps against the hull with its usual patience, ignorant and indifferent. The ropes groan faintly, the woods sigh. The vessel moves forward because it knows no other way. The sea does not mourn, does not pause, and neither does the ship. The men react in small, private, muted ways. One rubs his hands together, stiffened by cold and burdened thoughts. Another stares at the horizon, his mouth slightly open, as if the distance might somehow offer an answer. There are no orders, no ceremony. Life aboard continues in quiet, mechanical step. You notice how habit and repetition now carry more authority than the captain ever could. The maps feel thinner now. Every line seems uncertain, every marking less meaningful. Tracing your finger along the edge of a coast, a river, a bay, feels like running it along paper that will tear if pressed too hard. The ocean beyond these fragile outlines stretches infinite, indifferent, unbroken. You understand that the map, once a guide, is now a reminder of your own insignificance, of how little any human hand can truly contain the immensity of the world. You move among the men, observing them. Some whisper about what comes next. Who will take command? How will the voyage continue? There is no urgency, no panic, only a slow, heavy sense of adaptation. Leadership is a shape, a shadow. It can be assumed, delegated, or even survived without. The ship carries this truth in its timbers, the men carry it in their bones, and you carry it in your breath. Each day blurs into the next, as it always has, but now a subtle emptiness has crept into the routine. The same scraping of ropes, the same counting of barrels, the same meticulous rationing of water and biscuit, all these actions continue, yet they feel lighter in one sense and heavier in another. Lighter, because the obligation to follow a commanding voice has vanished. Heavier, because the responsibility for survival now rests equally on every hand, every mind, every exhausted body. You see the officers conferring quietly in corners, maps spread across barrels, lines traced with careful fingers. They speak softly, their words measured, weighed against the vastness of the horizon. Decisions are made slowly, cautiously, as if each choice might be swallowed by the sea or rejected by fate itself. The men obey without question, though their obedience now feels different, a shared acknowledgement of necessity rather than blind loyalty. At night, you lie awake on deck, listening to the ship breathe. Its creaks are deeper now, almost mournful. The wind hums against the rigging, and the faint slap of waves against the hull is rhythmic and unchanging. The world hasn't slowed down for Magellan's death. The constellations shift above, unfamiliar and cold. Some stars vanish behind clouds, while others burn faintly, distant and indifferent. You stare at them until your eyes blur, trying to recall the constellations you knew before the voyage, before so much had been lost. The men speak in fragments sometimes, names, dates, memories that surface and vanish as quickly as they appear. You listen more than you speak, for there's no one to truly answer your thoughts. The ship has no mouth, the ocean cares nothing for conversation, and you are left in a silence that borders on unbearable, a calm that presses in from all directions, heavy and patient. Even hunger takes on a new tone now. It's not sharper, not more urgent, only longer, more persistent, curling around you like the fog that sometimes descends at dawn. You chew stale biscuit and salted meat with a mechanical precision that has become almost meditative. You notice every texture, every grain, every lingering trace of salt. Food is sustenance, yes, but also an anchor, a reminder that your body still exists, even if the captain no longer does. The ship moves as if guided by unseen hands. The sails catch the wind without complaint, the ropes tighten without ceremony, and the planks shift underfoot with the same subtle groan as always. You realize the voyage no longer belongs to any one man, but to the ocean, the wind, and the ship itself. You belong, too, not as master or follower, but as a participant in this endless, indifferent rhythm. Sometimes you see Magellan in fleeting glimpses, in the creak of the mast, in the sharp shadow cast by a sail, in the quiet authority of a man carefully adjusting a rope. His absence is profoundly present. The world hasn't outwardly changed, yet it is subtly altered. Every decision, every motion, every breath acknowledges what has been lost, even when it goes unspoken. You dream occasionally, brief and fragmented visions. You see him walking the deck, pointing silently toward some distant land, or standing at the bow against the wind and spray. You wake, and he's gone. The men move silently, shadows across the water, ghosts of patience and routine. The maps remain thin and fragile, and the ocean stretches far beyond their borders. You begin to notice the weight of silence in ways you hadn't before. Conversations are lighter, sounds are sharper, and gestures are more deliberate. Even laughter seems a little unreal, a small act of defiance against the quiet that seeks to envelop everything. And yet, you laugh softly sometimes, almost involuntarily, at nothing at all, a private acknowledgement that the human heart endures, even in absence. The horizon shifts, pale and endless. Leaning against the railing, you trace the water with your eyes, noting the subtle movements, the quiet swell of distant waves, and the reflection of stars in the faint night's glow. The ship continues onward, guided by no one in particular, yet moving with a steadfast purpose all its own. Touching the ropes, cold and rough, you feel the rhythm in them, the faint pulse of life carried across fiber and timber. You notice the barrels, the masts, the sails, all the small, mechanical elements that insist upon continuity, each one a thread connecting the living to the ship to the sea, and the sea to a world that will continue long after the voyage ends, long after all names are forgotten. Sometimes you think of the men who have already vanished, swallowed by distance, disease, or the merciless elements. You think of those who remain, their faces etched with exhaustion and quiet understanding. You notice how each man moves carefully, slowly, as if his body has learned to measure every action along the long, arduous path of survival. And you, too, measure yourself. Each breath, each heartbeat, each blink of your eyes against the sun or fog. You are aware of the fragility of your existence, a mere rumor of a person adrift on an endless expanse of water. You're aware that the maps feel thinner now because their ink can't contain the vast distance you've traveled, nor the depth of the absence you carry within. The ship continues, the ocean continues, the sky continues, and life aboard continues, muted, measured, and mechanical. And somewhere deep inside, quiet and persistent, is the knowledge that you move forward not because of a man's command, but because the voyage itself demands it. Because the ropes will fray, the sails will tear, and yet the ship will relentlessly insist on progress, because the sea remains indifferent, eternal, and unchanging. You breathe, you move, you endure. And in the spaces between creaks and sighs, between wind and water, you carry the memory of a captain who no longer walks among you, a memory that is both weight and compass, both absence and guide, both sorrow and a strange, unspoken comfort. The maps are thinner, the horizon stretches infinitely, and the ship moves onward, always onward, across a world that does not pause, across a sea that neither mourns nor celebrates. The ocean begins to feel smaller, not in reality, but in perception. Each wave, each swell, each stretch of the horizon has become intimately known, and yet strangely unfamiliar, like a corridor you've walked so many times that its corners have subtly shifted. You recognize shapes that could be islands, coasts, or just clouds, and yet they're not what you remember. Familiarity has twisted into something alien, and every glance reminds you that the world continues relentlessly on its path, regardless of what is remembered or forgotten. You watch the sun rise over water that should feel welcoming, but doesn't. Its light is pale, as though exhausted by this long voyage. It casts long, thin shadows across the deck, exaggerating every rope, every plank, every worn hand that touches them. The warmth is real, but it no longer brings comfort. Even the sun seems to participate in this slow process of erasure, circling in its predictable rhythm above a world that has circled you in return. The men move quietly, their motions smaller, almost cautious. Some pause to study the horizon, tracing shapes and colors with eyes that have long ago learned the futility of trying to name everything they see. You do the same, letting your gaze drift lazily, noting the subtle shifts in color, the way the clouds gather like smoke from a fire that burns constantly, yet goes largely unnoticed. You realize that you no longer search for land, but instead seek differences, small signs that the sea itself hasn't yet claimed everything. The maps are thinner, frayed at the edges, and the lines that once marked coasts and currents feel fragile under your fingertips. You run a finger along one, tracing a bay or an inlet, and imagine how it must have seemed before the voyage, confident and precise. Now the lines are merely suggestions, reminders that no map can truly capture the living world, and no memory can fully preserve the person who set sail months ago. You remember Seville, the harbor, the smell of tar, and the bustling voices of the dockworkers. Of the individuals who once envisioned this voyage as a source of glory, little remains. It now exists more as a visceral experience than a tangible location. You sense it in the weariness of your muscles, the saline tang on your tongue, the steady pulse of the ship resonating beneath your feet. Though the city lies behind you, in a sense, there's no true return. It has been irrevocably altered by the ceaseless motion of the water, the isolating distance, and the relentless monotony that pervades everything. The crew moves like phantoms, mere outlines against the faint glimmer of the sea. Some trim the sails, others secure knots, still others scrape away ice or meticulously swab the decks with the deliberate precision of a sacred rite. You move alongside them, a small, almost insignificant component in a vast, indifferent mechanism. Words are scarce. When they are spoken, they carry the burden of observation, a notation that a rope is frayed or a cask is leaking. Conversation has been supplanted by necessity, and necessity has, in turn, replaced memory itself. The rhythm of meals persists, measured and unchanging. Biscuit crumbles between your fingers. Water carries a faint metallic taste. Salted meat is chewed slowly, with deliberate focus. You become acutely aware of its texture, the residue of months at sea clinging to it, and the subtle sense of endurance it embodies. Eating has become both an act of survival and a form of meditation, a small assertion of existence in a world that has quietly stripped away all else. The ocean shifts subtly, almost imperceptibly. Currents that were once predictable now seem shrouded in mystery. The wind blows from directions that defy expectation. Yet the sails respond with unwavering inevitability. You observe this and reflect on the dance between control and surrender, the interplay of effort and futility. Each action is small, precise, necessary in its way. Each breath is measured against the slow, patient unfolding of the days. At night, the stars are unrecognizable. Constellations you were certain you knew have shifted their positions. Or perhaps it is your own perception that has been altered. You trace lines in the sky, assigning names to fleeting shapes and figures that will vanish with the passing of a cloud or the next blink of an eye. You recall familiar constellations, the ones you learned before setting sail. But their order has been disrupted. Even the heavens participate in this subtle, ongoing rewriting of your world. The ship groans and creaks as always, a living entity that carries within it the memory of both raging storms and tranquil calm. You touch the ropes and planks, feeling the grain of the wood, the roughness of the fiber. It is strangely reassuring to perceive texture, to sense continuity in something tangible. Everything else, people, maps, memories, seems thin, fragile, gradually fading into the distance and repetition. Sometimes you catch a reflection in the water. Your own face appears briefly, gray and indistinct. You stare, yearning for recognition, but then the image vanishes. You are now a rumor of a person, carried by wind and wave, measured in motion and breath rather than in memory or story. The ocean's mirror offers no validation of the self. It only reveals what endures. The men speak in hushed tones. Sometimes they mention glimpsed islands, traced currents, or predicted winds. Their conversation is quiet, almost reverent. You listen without comment, aware that speech is another way of marking time. Another small ritual used to impose order on a world that resists it. Silence is heavier, but also familiar. You have learned to navigate within it, to measure your existence against its slow, unyielding rhythm. You pass places that resemble those you left behind months ago, and yet they are subtly altered. Cliffs appear in shapes that mimic memories. Rivers bend in patterns that echo your home. Forests rise like ghostly remnants of greenery you once knew. But nothing is truly the same. You come to realize that you have traveled the world and seemingly returned, but it is the world that has circled you, not the other way around. All that you once were is fading, faint enough to dissolve into the blue, the wind, the salt. The ship presses onward, carrying you toward home, or perhaps simply onward. Each day folds into the next with subtle variations. A rope frayed here, a cask cracked there, a man coughing softly. You notice these details because they are all that remains tangible. Life continues in increments measured by effort and observation, rather than by expectation. You feel the simultaneous tug of memory and forgetfulness. The harbor in Seville, the straits, the islands, the tranquility of the open sea, all blend together, blurred by repetition, distance, and the unrelenting rhythm of survival. You are no longer the same person who departed, nor are you fully a creature of this world at sea. You exist in a liminal space, a shadow, a rhythm, a measured breath. The wind picks up, the sails respond, the ropes creak, and the ship leans into motion. The ocean stretches in all directions, vast and indifferent. Indifferent to grief, to hope, to memory, to the echo of footsteps on distant decks. You lean against the railing and watch the water, noticing how the smallest swell reflects light and shadow, how color fades into color, how all distinctions blur with distance. You move through this world carefully, deliberately, noting the rhythm of each plank, each rope, each breath. The crew follows a silent choreography learned over months, adjusting sails, counting provisions, scraping deck. Each man seems small against the vastness of the ocean, yet each is a part of the immense continuity that carries you forward. The horizon bends, but never ends. You trace it with your eyes, imagining it folding back, bending in ways you cannot perceive. You realize that in circling back, you have not truly returned. You have only been inscribed into the endless loop of water and wind, time and distance, memory and oblivion. You are both present and absent, moving because the ship moves, existing because the voyage persists. The maps are worn, the lines faded, the stars unfamiliar. The sun rises and sets in muted patterns. You recognize none of it fully, yet you know the rhythm. Creak, breath, rope, swell, sail, horizon. You exist in the small, measured spaces between these repetitions, noting, enduring, observing. The world has circled you patiently, erasing and rewriting you as it wills. And still you breathe, you move, you endure. You continue into the blue that stretches endlessly, carrying memory, loss, fatigue, and the quiet persistence of survival, circling back to the beginning, only to find that what has returned is neither wholly familiar nor entirely lost, but something fragile, measured, and real, the self that remains in motion. You step onto solid ground and feel the deck beneath your boots replaced by cobblestones. The sound is sharper, echoing oddly after months of water-muted footsteps and the constant groan of planks. The harbor stretches before you, familiar yet subtly altered. The smells are the same: tar and fish, salt and wood, mingled with the faint smoke of cooking fires. And yet the air feels heavier, denser. Or perhaps it is just your lungs remembering how to fill themselves without the rhythm of rolling wave. Men and women move along the quay, their faces open with curiosity, polite and expectant. You hear voices calling names, laughter, the slap of boots against stone. People lean over railings, crane their necks, or gesture toward the ships, eager for tales, hungry for news of the world beyond. You remember the anticipation you once held for glory, for stories, for the thrill of recounting adventure. And now the thought feels distant, almost quaint, like a photograph faded at the edges. They ask what you saw. You hesitate, aware that words are inadequate. Maps, constellations, islands, straits, ice, sun, wind, all of it folds into the hollow of your chest. You cannot find phrases that capture months of monotony, the slow gnawing of hunger, the quiet erosion of certainty. Instead, you say simply, softly, water. The word floats between you and them, small, distilled, and sufficient in its insufficiency. They nod as if they understand. Perhaps they do. Perhaps they only acknowledge the effort of explanation, the attempt to compress an endless expanse into a human-sized sentence. You notice the subtle relief in their eyes. Not understanding, not disbelief, just recognition of a journey lived, a story told in the minimal language of survival. You move among them, stepping lightly, noticing the way the sun catches the edges of stone, the way the water laps against the quay, the way the wind carries scent and sound in ways both familiar and strange. You carry the voyage with you in ways that are invisible but persistent, the sway of balance, the heightened sensitivity to smell, the faint hum of the ocean in your bones. Every step on land is accompanied by echoes of waves and rope, the creak of mast and plank, the gentle tug of tide against the hull. The harbor feels smaller now. Its edges are defined, contained, and yet the world beyond it seems both vast and distant. You notice every detail: the glint of sunlight on water, the flutter of seagull wings, the movement of people in patterns you once took for granted. You watch the ropes of the quay, the nets drying in the sun, the barrels stacked neatly, and you are aware of the ship still in the background, a silent reminder that even here, the voyage continues in memory. You move through the crowd, recognizing faces that belong to a world you once knew, yet cannot fully inhabit. Conversations pass you by, talk of markets, families, repairs, politics. You hear them, but the words do not penetrate fully. Your mind remains partially at sea, half in rhythm with waves and wind, half tethered to the solidity of land. You are present, and yet not fully so, The streets smell of bread and smoke, of animals and earth. You inhale deeply, noticing texture and depth. And for a moment, the body remembers hunger, fullness, sensations beyond mere survival. You carry the taste of islands, the sweetness of fruit, the metallic tang of long months of salt water, the dry grit of biscuit chewed endlessly, the lingering warmth of tropical suns. All these flavors and sensations exist alongside the sharp, ordinary smells of home, creating a strange layering of time, memory, and perception. You pause to observe a child playing near the quay. The laughter rises and falls, sharp and ephemeral, like a bell struck in fog. You notice the way the small body moves, fluid and unself-conscious. And for an instant you feel recognition of life continuing, of cycles unbroken, of human motion in contrast to the deliberate, unyielding rhythm of the ocean. And then the memory of months at sea intrudes. The silence, the repetition, the slow erosion of certainty. You feel both worlds simultaneously pressing against you, neither fully absorbable. You hear the merchants calling prices, the creak of carts, the shuffle of boots. The cadence is different from that of the ship, precise and yet unpredictable. You notice how the human body adapts, how you shifted weight to keep balance on rolling decks, and now must relearn the subtle calibration needed to walk on solid ground. The muscles, memory ingrained in months of motion, respond to a world that no longer moves beneath you. You feel the tension and release, the shift of foot against stone, the small, unnoticed adjustments that once went unremarked in the sway of the ship. You approach the quay's edge, looking at the water that laps gently against posts and boat. It is calm, finite, familiar in ways that contrast sharply with the infinite expanses you have crossed. You reach down, let your fingers touch it, and notice the difference. No rolling waves, no subtle tug at your body, no cold creep beneath the skin, only water, patient and still, a reflection of sky and sun, and yet it carries memory. The taste of months at sea, the constant motion, the relentless cadence that never pauses, never forgives, never forgets. You notice the ships in harbor, smaller, grounded, constrained. Their sails hang slack, masts straight, ropes loose. They seem almost like toys compared to the living, breathing, heaving vessels that carried you around the globe. You remember the smell of tar, the sound of creaking wood, the taste of salt and wind. You remember the quiet horrors of monotony, the subtle humor that surfaced in shared endurance, the slow erosion of certainty and comfort. All of it is present, layered over this calm, grounded world, a weight that neither lifts nor diminishes. People ask questions. What lands did you see? What creatures? What storms? And you answer in minimal phrases, letting your voice float, unburdened by detail, because the details cannot be carried back intact. Water, you say again, or wind, or sky. Words are insufficient, yet sufficient for this audience. They accept them, nod, smile politely, perhaps recognizing that some experiences cannot be fully translated. You walk slowly through the quay, feeling both the solidity and the strange dissonance of land. Each step is a careful, measured, unconscious meditation. The horizon stretches behind the harbor, still infinite in a sense, in the faint trace of waves beyond the small boats. The world seems smaller, yet heavier with memory. You feel the weight of months, the erosion of self, the persistence of motion that has carried you through storms, hunger, and silence. You pause, resting your hands on the railing, your eyes tracing the water's edge. You imagine the miles you have traveled, the paths you have traced, the oceans crossed, and the storms endured. And yet you realize none of it feels like completion. You have returned, but nothing has been restored to its original state. The city is unchanged in structure, yet altered in perception. You are altered irreversibly. You carry the voyage in the angles of your joints, the rhythm of your breath, the quiet awareness of each heartbeat. And the horizon calls quietly in memory, if not in sight. It looks back at you, patient, indifferent, eternal. You feel the weight of observation, the subtle insistence of distance, the knowledge that motion does not end simply because land has been reached. You are part of something larger, beyond names, beyond maps, beyond understanding. The voyage does not end at the quay. It continues in memory, in rhythm, in the quiet, enduring presence of water. The sun dips lower, casting long shadows across cobblestones and boats, and you remain standing, observing, breathing. People continue to ask, to watch, to expect stories. You continue to answer in minimal phrases, in small truths, in words that reflect only the surface of a vast, endless experience. The harbor is solid, finite, familiar, yet foreign. The ships rest, the ropes slack, the sails furled. And still the water stretches, and still it waits, patient and eternal. You step back, feeling your feet on stone, your hands on the railing, your body grounded, yet still carrying rhythm and memory. The city hums around you, alive with people and sound. Yet you hear the ocean beneath it all, whispering in waves and wind, in creaks and sways, in patient indifference. You are both here and elsewhere, a traveler returned, but not restored, a witness to the world's continuity and its quiet disregard. And you understand that home is not a place, nor a harbor, nor a set of questions answered. Home is the rhythm you carry, the weight you endure, the quiet motion that does not pause. The harbor nods politely. People smile and wait. And you look at the horizon, and it looks back. You are part of its endlessness, patient, enduring, and irrevocably changed. And that brings us to the end of tonight's story. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. Sleep well.